All right, here we go, this 5 o'clock hour. Longtime columnist for the Oklahoman, Daily Oklahoman, covers Oklahoma, covers Oklahoma State, the Big 12, and much more. Barry Tramble joins us now on Sikkim 365 Radio, 365 Sports. Barry, thanks for your time. Does Oklahoma know who they are?
Oh, yeah, I think they do know, and I think it's a little bit strange to them. I think they're a sort of a schizophrenic team. You know, one week they play great offense, not so great defense, and the next week it's the opposite, and then it goes back again. So, you know, just when you get one thing fixed, the other one starts to leak. So it's an interesting year in Oklahoma. They've got 5 games, and 4 have been one possession games at the end.
Do you feel that there is an awakening on the horizon once some of the guys, especially on the offensive line, gain more experience? They're not getting those chunk plays anymore, Barry, and in large part that's due to the offensive lines not knocking people around like they did before.
Yeah, now the running game came through pretty good Saturday, so that was a big improvement. Best they've looked all year. K-State's always a physical team, so that's a good sign. I think defenses are playing them different. Defenses are playing deep, keeping everything under them. I think Iowa State has really impacted the Big 12, the way the Cyclones play defense. Mostly a 3-man line, occasional blitz, but not many. And for a team like Oklahoma, which has had, a guy like Spencer Rattler is a very good deep ball thrower, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray. Sooners have liked to throw it around quite a bit, and they're just not letting teams aren't letting Oklahoma do that. So you got to be patient. They were much more patient Saturday against K-State. Spencer Rattler threw deep twice, 1 incomplete, 1 interception. The rest of the game, he was 22 of 23 on short and intermediate passes. So I think that's what Oklahoma's going to have to do until they bring those safeties up a little bit.
Barry, what have you thought about Spencer Rattler's play so far? I mean, obviously did well enough to get the job done on Saturday, and some impressive numbers, as you just mentioned, as far as the completion percentage goes. But it has been up and down, and it's not all on him. The offensive line has something to do with that. What are your thoughts on Rattler at this point?
He played just so most of the first 3.5 games. He's been really good. Second half, West Virginia, at K-State, really good. I think he was just going through an adjustment period on this, what we just talked about, the difference in how you have to play. And I think he got a little impatient at times in the second half against Tulane, against Nebraska. But for the most part, he's been really good these last game and a half, and maybe he's starting to realize that, hey, we're just going to have to, I got some guys that can do things with the ball. We'll throw short and see if they can make it along a big play. When your running game is slow, nothing's going to work. People think about Lincoln Riley as a disciple of Mike Leach, but he's actually the air raid type stuff that we remember so well from 20 years ago. That's not what Oklahoma does anymore, if ever. Lincoln's always run the ball a bunch. And when that running game gets stuffed, which it's frankly mostly has been the first 4 games, then things sort of get off the rails. But it was back on track. The tailbacks combined for, I don't know, I think it was 19 carries, 120 yards or something like that. So really, really productive. And that's what they need. If they can run the ball, all this passing stuff will take care of itself.
Do you feel like it's taken Kennedy Brooks, who we love? We watched him in high school. And then, of course, he had a nice thing going and opted out last year. It seems like to me that he's kind of just getting into a groove or a rhythm. Is that been mentioned at all?
Yeah, no, most people wouldn't agree with you, and I probably wouldn't agree with you. Kennedy Brooks always looks like he's in a rhythm to me. Here's the deal. For the first 4 games, they went more with Eric Gray at tailback. That changed Saturday, 15 carries for Kennedy Brooks, 4 for Gray. They threw Gray 2 or 3 passes. But I wonder, and I haven't asked Lincoln this, and he wouldn't tell us even if it was true. They're down to 2 varsity tailbacks, scholarship tailbacks. And I think going into the season, Lincoln was very cautious about protecting both of them. Can't afford to get either one of them hurt. And I think Brooks is the guy they want the most. I think in a way Lincoln's been protecting Kennedy Brooks and knows when it comes to Texas and Oklahoma State and some of the games that's going to determine this season, he's going to need Kennedy Brooks to shoulder the load, maybe more than ever before. So I think there's been some protectionism going on with Kennedy Brooks. Eric Gray's a wonderful player. He's fine. But Kennedy Brooks is something else in terms of he's not a home run hitter, but he sure makes a lot of 9-yard gains. Mm-hmm. And he sure takes a lot of 3-yard gains and turn them into 5-yard gains. And in this new age of football that we're seeing this season with less scoring, fewer possessions, sort of old-fashioned football, when Sam Bradford's the quarterback or Baker Mayfield and it's video game football, who cares if your tailback makes 3 or 5 yards? It doesn't matter. If somebody's going to throw for 17 yards on the next snap. But in this kind of football, the difference between 3 and 5 yards is the difference between winning and losing a game. And Kennedy Brooks is magnificent at that. I think Lincoln's protecting him.
Barry Trammell, the Oklahoman, with us on Sikkim 365 Radio.
Barry, a couple weeks ago, maybe Oklahoma fans probably looking forward to this matchup with Texas after they got throttled by Arkansas. But since really the second half or the fourth quarter of that Arkansas game, they have not stopped. Everything's kind of gone their way. What have you seen that's so different from Texas over the last 3 weeks that should give Oklahoma a little bit more pause than they would have had 3 weeks ago?
Well, I think that Texas offense is much better than it was what we saw through that Arkansas halftime. Clearly, Bijan Robinson can run it, and Texas can run it pretty well. But Casey Thompson, he's not, he's an Oklahoma kid. He grew up about 8 miles from my house. So I know all about Casey Thompson. He's not a fabulous passer, but he's a pretty good passer, and he's pretty mobile, and he can get some things done, especially when the running game is going great guns. So I think that Texas offense is much more explosive, much more productive with Casey Thompson at the controls. I think Texas defense is probably a little bit still suspect. Arkansas pushed them around pretty good, and while Arkansas's got them a good team, it's not, let's not pretend they're the '85 Bears or somebody. This is not a Georgia. Snuffed them out pretty good. So I think the Texas defense is still a major question mark, but I think that offense is probably for real.
So, Barry, how do you think Oklahoma matches up? I know you just pointed out the kind of scouting report on Texas. Oklahoma's defense, maybe not the best showing against K-State, but they've obviously been kind of the story of why they are unbeaten still at this point, having to pick up the load for the offense on occasion. The offense starting to kind of maybe get their bearings. How do you feel about the matchups they're going to face against Texas?
Well, Texas will have, even though the Texas defense has not been, great, Texas has good ball players, and it's going to be tough for that Oklahoma offensive line to push them around. They sometimes do, sometimes don't, but sometimes do down in the Cotton Bowl. So if they can get the run, then I think Texas is going to be in trouble. But if Texas can sort of put the kibosh on the OU running game, the Sooner offense is not going to be as explosive as what most people have come to expect. The OU defense has actually played really well on first and second down in most games, but even in the games where they kept points to a minimum, they can't get off the field on third down or fourth down. Even Kansas State converted 4 fourth downs. OU had 7 possessions Saturday in Manhattan total. In the old days, they'd have 7.5.
Mm-hmm.
So they need some help from that defense getting off the field and get the ball back to Spencer Rattler.
Yeah, I saw that. That seemed to be, there's nothing worse than that. You can't get off the field and you can't get the ball. And you're right, Kansas State just basically didn't care. They just said, we're going to go for it no matter where we are. And that's got to be a problem. That's got to be a concern.
Yeah, and Kansas State had a pretty good strategy on like 3rd and 9. They didn't run a play to make 9 yards. They'd run a play to make 5 yards. And then go for it on 4th and 4. Then worry about the 4 yards. So Sooners have got to change that. I mean, you can't. Their percentage on 3rd and long defense is terrible this year. That 3rd and long is where you ought to be making all your money, and they really haven't done that this year.
We saw Oklahoma State, Baylor in Stillwater in a battle of two teams unbeaten, and Oklahoma State hammered the ball in the first half, and then they just made enough plays, overcome the turnovers from Spencer Sanders. I saw under your Twitter feed, I'm not sure if you wrote this, but it's like that Spencer Sanders is the Tasmanian devil. Is that kind of what he creates, so much anxiety watching him play for OSU fans?
Yeah, and Mike Gundy talked about it. He said, you know what? He said, I love Spencer Sanders as a leader and all that. He said, you just got to live with him, some of the things he does. He makes a lot of plays. He'll throw it great, but he said he's going to have some games where he doesn't, he makes some mistakes. He said, you just have to live with it. So Cowboys were able to live with it Saturday night. You don't win many modern football games when you lose the turnover battle 3-0. But in this day and age, where the scoring is less, turnovers aren't quite as catastrophic. You know, in the old days, you know, around here we know it well because of the wishbone. You know, Switzer's teams used to lose 5 fumbles and beat somebody 41-14. Well, part of that is if your offense when a turnover occurs in the modern age, when Baker Mayfield, Robert Griffin, Kyler Murray, one of those guys is on the field, you commit a turnover, you don't worry about the field position. You worry about, dang, there was a chance for us to score. We had the ball. We were going to score. That's really not what OSU's about. You know, there's no great reason to think they're going to march down the field and score when the offense takes the field. So if they commit a turnover, it's not like, well, there was a chance to score. Probably weren't going to score anyway. Defense is tough enough that it can sort of stand in the gap and keep teams from scoring. So turnovers aren't quite as costly, I don't think, in this day and age with OSU. But still, he needs to take care of the ball. If Spencer Sanders plays the way he did against K-State, he was fantastic. Mm-hmm. They're going to be really tough to beat because they got a good defense. And they can run the ball to some degree. And he's a guy that can really run and make plays with his feet. So if he doesn't throw the ball to the other team, they can be a handful in Stillwater.
Yeah, Jalen Warren, we've talked about it today. He runs so hard. We're so – I mean, I'd watched him before, but, I mean, Baylor's usually pretty physical, and Oklahoma State was the more physical team, which was interesting to see that. And that defense led by Jim Knowlesbury, I mean, I know he's been around Stillwater for a little while now, has a great story, but just how impressed have you been by him, and what's kind of the buzz surrounding Jim Knowles and what he's done with this defense?
Well, it's been a slow process, you know. He replaced a good coach. Gundy fired Glenn Spencer after the 17 season, I think it was. And Glenn had done a really good job. I mean, it wasn't 1984 or anything, but they were doing a pretty good job on defense. And Gundy said, let's try to be better. Knowles struggled putting in his system year 1. They got pretty good year 2. And they got really good year 3. And I think they're really good now. So, he's without superstars. I don't know that there's a bunch of NFL prospects out there on the field, but they got guys that can run. They got a line that's pretty deep and can really make plays. So the defense is probably going to carry OSU throughout the season, and you know they're 5-0, and so they're at least in the running for something special.
Barry, we have not talked to you since late July. We haven't talked to you in a while, but since late July when the news about Oklahoma, Texas, the SEC, and the Big 12 has had kind of a semi-comeback with what they've been able to do to add 4 teams. How has that gone over in Oklahoma with what they've added and somehow survived yet another one of these realignment-type earthquakes?
Oh, it's been well received. You know, there's still a lot of consternation not about the format or the 12 teams. Everybody's pretty excited about that. Just the financials. Everybody knows that that's the uncertainty. That's the concern. Will this work? Will they be able to get close to what they've been making? How big of a haircut are they going to take? That's really the concern. But when you think about adding Central Florida and Cincinnati and Brigham Young, I'm not personally excited about Houston, but you talk about those other three teams, those other three programs, that brings a lot of life in. Now, does it have the national branding of OU and Texas? No. It's sort of fun to get fresh blood and new teams and good teams. Don't look now, but two of those teams are in the top 10.
Yeah.
BYU's 10, Cincinnati's up to 5 or wherever they're at. And Central Florida's, 17 and 18 were in back-to-back major bowls. So we're talking about some really good programs. I think it's got the potential to be a really good football league. I really do.
Barry, I'm just curious because there was so much speculation after all that happened. Did you believe that Oklahoma State was going to find a life raft in the Pac-12 or the Big Ten or somewhere along those lines, or did you feel like their best bet was the Big 12 sticking together and that was one of their only options?
Oh, I didn't know for sure, but I didn't think that Pac-12 expansion was an automatic or even necessarily likely. I think the Pac-12 would like to expand. I think it would like to raise its branding. I think it realizes that adding 4 good schools from the Big 12 would help them in a lot of ways. But, their presidents make decisions based on all kinds of things. And the Pac-12 is not all that interested in adding schools that are so different culturally from Stanford and Cal Berkeley and Oregon. That's going to be a difficult, if anything ever happens like that, that's going to be a difficult marriage. And it wasn't going to be all that pleasant for the OSUs and TCUs and Texans, whoever might have been involved. It wasn't going to be all that pleasant for them. So this, I think, was the best solution if the money works. Here's the deal, guys. Right now, you have to say the new look Big 12 going forward from a competitive standpoint, is in just as good a shape as the Pac-12. Mm-hmm. And frankly, the ACC, same goes for the ACC. The ACC is really Clemson. That's what we're talking about. Clemson is the ACC, and we see this year with Clemson struggling. I mean, there's nothing at all to get excited about the ACC. Their last unbeaten were Wake Forest and Boston College. I mean, you don't want to see those teams if it's the Belk Bowl. So I think the Big 12 has solidified itself. Before OU and Texas bolted, the Big 12 solidified itself as the number 3 conference. And I think the new look Big 12 has a chance to get back to that status fairly soon. I don't know if it will, but it has a chance to.
Barry, thank you, buddy. Appreciate your time. Barry Trammell, Oklahoman, for Sikkim 365 Radio and 365 Sports, has been covering Oklahoma football, the Big 12, and the country, a columnist for a long, long time. At Barry Trammell, BerryTrammel. And one of our chat room, I think I just went blank, said, I wish he would get, I'm not going to repeat, I wish he would get as excited when he talks about Oklahoma State as he does Oklahoma.
Yeah, I didn't notice much of a difference, but
Donnie,
I can understand where people probably do pick up on that. Yeah, I mean, I think this Oklahoma-Texas game is going to be fascinating for a lot of different reasons. I mean, just the matchup itself is always one you look forward to, but this is a wildly different matchup than it's been in recent years. I mean, Texas had the goof of goofs as their head coach the last few years, and Tom Herman, and just kind of the immature way that he had that program. I don't know. With Sarkisian, it's just night and day. Like the focus, the energy, the physicality. I mean, it's across the board. I did the play calling. I just think it's night and day, and they are actually operating like a premier, blue blood type program should be operating. I mean, it's not perfect by any stretch, But it's a lot better than what we saw the last few years with Tom Herman, where they were finding ways to lose and not showing up. So I think they're going to be rip-roaring ready to go this weekend. I'm picking Texas to win this game as of right now. I might change that by tonight. I don't know. But just my early gut is saying Texas because they've looked more impressive. At the same time, Oklahoma's undefeated for a reason. As much as they've struggled, they still find ways to win. And wouldn't surprise me if they did that again this weekend. So I'm very curious about what goes down on Saturday.
Tom Herman run Bijan Robinson 35 or 6 times in a game ever?
He wouldn't even get 20 carries.
No, 20, there were times last year where you'd see Bijan Robinson rip off a 25-yard run, and you're like, well, gotta give that guy the ball again, and then he wasn't even in the game for 18 plays. You're like, what are you doing, Tom?
No, he's a special player. No question.
Sometimes – here's the thing I like about Steve Sarkisian's offense. He has simplified the essence of it. It's not a simple offense. I mean, you see there's a lot of different things of it, but here's his mission. The best guys are going to get the ball in their hands. That means Bijan Robinson. That means Whittington. That means all these guys that are the best players. Tom Herman's offense was just simple. It was, my quarterback is going to do everything. Every single thing. And it either works or it doesn't. And that was what it was. And, I know that was the preseason, but I was not surprised to see Sam Ehlinger do so well for the Colts in the preseason with some actual quarterback coaching as opposed to, all right, Sam, go out there and be big and tough. Go make something happen. That's not really coaching. That's just, go be a super athlete, which he was.
Yep.
Well, Oklahoma's got to shore some things up on defense. I mean, I think if, you handle – it's easy to say you handle Robinson. I mean, that's going to be the big key is, like, how do they handle Bijan Robinson? If they are able to keep him relatively in check, I like their chances because we have not had to see Casey Thompson go and win a football game yet, right? We've seen him have a really nice completion percentage and manage the game really well and – do far more in the positive category than the negative category. I mean, he's done exactly what they've needed him to do, but we have not seen them in the heat of the moment, in the Cotton Bowl, game on the line, rankings on the line, like all that stuff, him have to go and win a football game. So you stop Robinson and then make him have to go to work. And I'm sure he's ready for it. He's an Oklahoma kid, like Barry said. He's the son of Charles Thompson, who's a Sooners legend. I mean, for goodness sake. So I'm sure he would love nothing more than to upset Dad and beat the team he grew up watching on Saturday. So he'll be rip-roaring ready to go. And Riley better have his guys ready as well. I mean, this is the game they all circle, and I think they're pretty evenly matched. I think this could easily go either way, and that's always the case regardless, but I think especially this year, it really could go either way.
Last year, Bijan Robinson had 183 yards or so in the bowl game against Colorado, had 703 yards on 86 carries. He has 105 carries on 652 yards, and they've played 5 games?
Yeah.
Because they feed him.
Yeah.
Feed the animal. He's a difference, man. He's got that stride and balance and vision.
Okay, I'll take you to any level. Almost every level of football, running backs get better as you give them the ball because receivers aren't necessarily running at you. They're running away from you already. That's their goal, is to run away from you at the start. Running backs are running at you. So physically, if you've got a good running back who continues to run at you and at you and at you and at you, then you get tired of that. And Bijan Robinson is not only someone who runs around you, he runs through you. Like Abram Smith at Baylor. About 15 times you have to tackle him. You're like, I don't want to tackle this dude anymore.
Yeah, last year, and we get into this, but Bijan Robinson's most carries in a game were 16. 16.
Well, it was a short schedule.
And I know he's a freshman, but he was, I know. But because Ehlinger was their battering ram.
No,
and Rashawn Johnson got a few carries, obviously, as well.
I don't know what Ehlinger's average number of carries were, but if it was 20, it wouldn't shock me. I mean, he was getting like 20 carries a game. I mean, he was so much of their offense. But, Bijan's special. It's got to be nice for Longhorn fans to have a recruit that was so highly touted to actually live up to it. Not saying that others haven't. Not saying that all of them don't. But, particularly at running back, it's been a long time. Deontay Foreman had some success a few years ago.
Yeah,
that was
2,000 yards.
Yeah, had a good season, and they've had guys here or there. But, I remember all the buzz around Keontae Ingram?
Yep.
Remember what he was supposed to be, like the difference-making, like legend in the making, and he's transferred to USC. They've got a guy who's living up to that billing. And they just have to feed him and keep him running. And the more he runs, the better he'll be, and then the more of a chance you have to win. But, Oklahoma first and foremost has to stop him on Saturday.
When we come back, by the way, Scott Drew and Baylor men's basketball opened up practice, the defending champions. Jack just got back from that. We'll talk more about that again tomorrow. And I had one other note. I know we got to go. We'll come back with that maybe tomorrow on we'll do that tomorrow on the Big 12 and the Texas teams when everything comes together and what they're going to try to do with kind of a special type